What further update can you give us on the project?
As you'll be aware, Deputy, we've sent you some of our meeting notes relating to the last two project meetings we've had. I think they've been quite detailed about the progress that we've made, but to be brief, the project is progressing. We have a limited resource available this year to take us up to and through the planning application process. As the documents have said, we've started to do some of the reports that are required for the application, such as ecological reports and things like that. So we want to keep on top of that. We've met recently with the Children's Commission, who felt that was important to get young people's views, although we've had input from young people all the way through the process, through the Jersey Skate Park Association and youth clubs. So I think we've been quite good in regards to engaging with young people, but it was important that we had the Children's Commissioner briefed and I believe on board. So as I said, we've got a lot of the ground investigations currently going on. We're just waiting to get the tender evaluation for the designer signed off. I spoke to the Director General of GHE, and that's one of these priorities, is to sign that off so we can engage the designer, which will lead us hopefully to a planning application later on this year and a build in 2021.
Well, thank you for that. At the last meeting, you did indicate that it was then at the design stage, and I interpret what you say as meaning that the design stage has been moved on, but you still hope to get the planning application before the end of the year?
Yeah, that's the intention. Obviously, COVID's had effects in all sorts of areas, and this is another one. But yeah, absolutely, we're doing what we can in regards to some of the reports we need, so that we can lead into the planning application a little bit quicker later on in the year. But I'm assured that the funding's available. Like I say, we've been given £100,000 this year to progress through planning application and the design stage, with the rest of the money, I presume, being made available in 2021 to build the project. Some of that is government funding, some of that is funding from the Regeneration Steering Group, and a small amount of money from Ports of Jersey as well.
Okay, good. Can I move on now to Fort Regent, which I suspect the Minister will again designate to your good self. Could you provide us with an update on the progress of the ideas for the Fort's development? In the government plan, 3 preferred themes were identified for future use, these being Jersey Business Hub, Botanic Gardens and Sports Village. Could you advise how far you got with each of those?
I'm going to back this one back to the Minister, because I don't actually sit on that group. That's one that the Minister sits on, so I'm sure the Minister will be able to update you as best he can.
Thank you, Senator. There's been some what I would describe as quite exciting progress with the Fort Regent Steering Group that's chaired by the Deputy of Trinity. So there are now some firm plans for the fort have been worked up, and some detail have been put around those plans. There's still a little bit of work to do, but I would expect that we'll be seeing some firm announcements as to the future of the fort as we move into the early autumn. But again, I don't want to usurp the position of the chair of that group, and I'm not sure who would. So I'm just thinking aloud. I'm trying to remember when our next meeting is, but I can update you separately. I can update you separately as to the exact timetable, which I hope we can agree at the next Fort Regent Steering Group meeting.
Right. Sorry, is that group just
some really good progress being made?
Well, thanks, sir. I'm pleased to hear. Sorry, is that group you've just referred to the same as what I've got down as the Fort Regent Working Group? And is that are you a part of that?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you refer to...
Led by Deputy of Trinity. I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact timetable for announcements, but it is imminent.
All right, okay, we'll leave that for a separate meeting then. Final question on the fort then is, during the review of the government plan, or our review, we recommended that because of the crossover in remits, the Fort Regent Working Group and the Sports Facilities Group be amalgamated. Has this happened? Is it going to happen?
No, it's not happened. I think it's unlikely that it will happen. Senator Farnham is leading the Sports Facilities Group, and there is a collaboration has been required because it's likely that some sports facilities at the fort will, in the fullness of time, be displaced. And I know Senator Pallett, Sports Facilities Group, will be taking that into consideration with the work that he's doing. I'm not sure if Steve would like to.
Department previously, would I right in thinking that if players were employed by the rugby club, essentially that there'd be no and housed, etc., there wouldn't be any problem in them seeking alternative employment as well, additional employment to bolster what the RFU are looking for?
Well, that would depend on their status in terms of whether they were entitled or whether they were registered. So there would be some impact, I presume. I'm just my own thoughts. I think there would be some impact on some of the jobs that they could do locally. I think from a point of view of the RFU, I think that as long as it's a level playing field and all the clubs are taking the same approach, I see that as a benefit. I think levelling the playing field and all the clubs having the same degree of financial support and roughly the same financial commitments, I think will be beneficial to us locally. Another aspect I think they've talked about is potentially having a North and South league, so some of the travel costs would be limited. Again, they're all ideas I think that are being floated at the moment, but there's nothing firm around what they may look like.
Yeah, I'll think of that. I appreciate it's early days yet. The final question in this area is, you already indicated that you would expect to be able to give some support and maintain funding for the club into 2021. And I take it from what you say that the precise amount is not yet established. One concern I have is that if there is a reorganisation, then the standard of playing in the league might not be as good as might be, which in turn might affect the quality of teams and therefore the viewing figures. When I say viewing, the spectator figures, shall I say. I sense it's on that basis that you've been happy to give support in the past, i.e. supporters of the opposing club come over to the island. Would your degree of support be influenced by the level of support coming in from outside the island?
From a personal perspective and my own view, I think the level playing field is important. I think the different ways that players could be engaged could provide the club with some more financial stability moving forward, which I think is important. Will it lower the standard? Not necessarily. I think the league will always be competitive in my view. So I think it will always attract people to come and watch. What it may do, it may actually lead to more local players being involved in the club from a first team point of view, from a Jersey Reds point of view. And I think a lot of people that watch the club feel that's something that has possibly been missing over the last few years, is that local connection on the playing side. So there may be opportunities. I know there's one or two players that have been signed recently that have come up through the academy, and that's a very positive aspect. So I think there could be pros and cons to some of that, but I think having some local players playing has always been a draw for local spectators, and that we may see more of that.
Well, thank you. I certainly accept that view, although, of course, the trying to maintain our status in a professional era is difficult from just a homegrown product. Anyway, we've done enough on that aspect. I think I'll hand you over.
Some of the arts, some of our assets are probably well placed for benefiting from the fiscal support programme. I refer in the first instance to the Opera House, which is now becoming overdue for some more structural work and rejuvenation and refurbishment. So I'd very much like to see some of our arts assets not least the Opera House, benefit from that fiscal stimulus funding. I'm not sure which officer would want to just update Deputy Pamplin quickly on the, possibly Dan, the fiscal support and what we've given, because we've brought forward, I think we've delivered most of the annual grant to the organisations this year to allow them to continue moving, and what discussions we're having for further fiscal support. See them through.
Certainly, Minister. I'll hand over to Chris for some of the detail on the numbers, but so in principle, we have been working with Art House Jersey, the Jersey Opera House and the Arts Centre, who are key arm's length bodies that we support through grants in partnership to deliver various cultural and arts activity. Obviously, the COVID situation has meant that we've had to reforecast cash flows, and I've worked very closely with all organisations to make sure that we understand what their financial needs going forward are, and indeed in some cases they have returned money, which has been hugely helpful and part of the effort to support Jersey PLC, as it were. But as you might imagine, going forward, we are having quite detailed conversations on the basis that there is significant growth in the government plan allocated as it stands going forward, and how can we best flex that growth to support ongoing activity. And to some extent, this is why it's very important to get the cultural strategy delivered this year, so that it can to some degree direct where we spend and what our priorities are.
Are we only distributing the 2018 funds? It's a question I get asked a lot.
In early 2019, we myself and Senator Pallett and the Deputy Tadia agreed in principle to broaden the distribution of the lottery proceeds. Obviously, that's going to be a decision for the states. But we set to work on how we might do that. We did get off to a bit of a false start, because we originally thought we might engage with a UK organisation to manage that, but we backtracked after further consideration. We backtracked on that on the grounds that although we did a detailed tender process and we didn't get as much local interest as we thought, once the announcement was made that was the direction of travel, we got a lot more local support, and that I think has led to the position we are now with the Jersey Funders Group, of which the Associated Jersey Charities are part. That's why we only, I think if I remember correctly, an officer will correct me, we went to the States, instead of allocating in 2019 all of the 2018 profits, we asked the States to allocate £1 million of profits. That left the balance of 2018. So because of the pandemic, the work was delayed, and that's why we were keen just to get that balance of 300 and something thousand to the AJC for 2018. So that tidies up 2018. Under normal circumstances, the 2018 grant is made by the end of 2019, and the 19 grant will normally be made in the autumn of this year. So we talked about this at private scrutiny hearing. So now we're contemplating how that process might work. Whether we give all of the lottery proceeds to the funders group, who are already benefiting from dormant bank account money. So we're creating a sort of a larger pot of money to be spread across the community. So we're doing that work now, and ultimately we'll be coming to the States with a proposition. I would think it will be October by the time we present that.
So this is really interesting, because we can clear something up here, because there's a bit of confusion going on, because during the pandemic there was the funders group that came along, which is basically all the funders, the James Knott Trust, Lloyds Bank, AJC, Greville Bain. So it funneled the system, so charities were needing money during the pandemic, they forego their usual grant initiative procedures, so it could funnel through who was the best one to deliver the grants. And then there's this Jersey Community Foundation Limited, which I think you're referring to, which was set up and in place by March, which, as Senator Gorse explained, was going to manage the dormant bank accounts money that was released to support charities also. But you're there also saying that this Jersey Community Foundation Limited could be set up to then take over the lottery funding. So that raises questions in terms of, because it's registered on the Charities Commissioner's website, and the governors are all sitting on charities of the island at the moment. So are you worried that's not a conflict of interest if this group of governors who are sitting on charities at the moment will be overseeing the distribution of grants to other charities? And it just raises a few questions there. If you can clear that up, I think that'd be really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's understood. So the organisations you refer to are part of the same organisation. The group sits above the company, as it were. And we're meeting with them next week for we're setting up a number of presentations, including one to Scrutiny about how this might work. But I think the idea, the group, the representatives from across the fundraisers in the island community to work in a consensual and democratic way. And from what we've seen so far, it looks to be a very good way forward. But we're sharing with you the progress, because we have to get this resolved and get the money allocated as soon as possible. And one of the reasons we didn't leave that 300,000 outstanding is given the impact on the pandemic on charities. We thought that was better, getting that into the community as quickly as possible.
So just to quickly clear up, so the proposition, that fund for the 2018 funds goes to the AJC, which they will distribute as part of the funders group for people who need it as normal, and then we'll wait for you to hear about going forward for 2019, possibly with this foundation. So
the AJC will distribute that money as they've always done amongst to the charity sector. I mean, what we have to decide, for example, is whether we give all of the lottery money to the new funders group, or we give some of it to the funders group, some of it to the AJC. If we give it all to the funders group, then they will then distribute some to the AJC. So it's just the logistics of how it all works we have to iron out, find a consensus on. And we'll work closely. We'll work closely with Scrutiny on it. I've no strong feelings other than we need to get the money into the community to a broader community base as soon as possible. So happy to work in partnership and find the right consensus.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I'd imagine, you know me, it's all about transparency for the charities who've gone through a tough time. All right, thank you, Minister. I know we're fast running out of time, so
and officers, myself, Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister, to discuss direction. We wrote to the bailiffs' chambers in regards to setting up a working party. Unfortunately, that happened about 3 or 4 days before COVID really took a bite. What we need to do at the moment, I think, and I've already spoken to both the Minister and officers around writing back to the bailiff as to what that direction should be and what that working party should look like. But it will require, and it'd be no surprise to you, it will require input from policy officers. And I think the difficulty at the moment is, as you know, all of our policy officers are deeply involved with COVID and COVID legislation and COVID policy, and it is going to be difficult to prioritise one or more of those officers to deal with any move in the liquor licensing legislation. But we do intend writing back to the bailiff, asking him on his following up on the previous letter that we sent.
Okay, good. I was going to ask questions about who comprise members of the working group, but perhaps you could reply to us in writing on that. But generally speaking, though, your reply also referred to membership of that group, including representatives of the licensing bench. Could you confirm that involvement of the bench is solely as regards the composition of the licensing authority, and they won't be involved in any matter of policy?
At the moment, there is no defined view on what that working group should look like. I have my own view. You probably have your own as well. It would have to be something that was going to move forward in a way that I think was acceptable to the Assembly and the wider public and the licensing trade themselves. A lot would depend on whether we were looking to amend the current law or look for a new draft law. I have my own view about the direction we should take, but I'm only one of a number of people that have got an interest in this. So we need to write back to the bailiffs' chambers, and I think we need to be clear about what the terms of reference would be for a working party, and we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, here. But
the first work package 1, has been commissioned from PwC. Dan is working extensively with the PwC team. That's provisionally skills and supply use tables and 1 or 2 other initiatives. I would expect the first substantive outputs of that in September. Dan, is there anything you quickly want to add to that?
Yeah, it's just as you say, really, Richard, supply use tables, the tools to allow us to predict some of the future scenarios and considerations that the Minister was talking about earlier. A very thorough evidence review, so that we're making sure that we've got evidence-based policy going forward. So in some cases, strategic work needs to be informed by additional data, and we're making sure we understand what those data needs are. There's some sector reports in hospitality and retail to support the development of strategic documents in the context of a massively changed economic backdrop, and upskilling preparation to make sure that the skills required for the future are in place. And finally, design of the productivity support scheme, which the Minister referenced for delivery in next year's government plan.
Thanks, Dan.
Right, so shall I take it that we're going to move on now to the government